we are not fixed
Right.
beings.
Right.
We are constantly in a state of change and impermanence. Of course, the Buddha, without the luxury of a stethoscope or a electron microscope or whatever, intuited this
Right.
2,500 years ago. But modern science is proving it. And we are in this constant sort of vibratory exchange of atoms and molecules that's happening all of the time inside the human body. And this really can reframe how we think about disease and well-being, to be honest.
And longevity. Peace and riches blessings. I am Michael B. Beckwith, the host of Take Back Your Mind. Peace and blessings, and welcome to Take Back Your Mind. Now, for those of you who have been tuning in for a period of time, you know what I mean by that. You know that I teach that oftentimes the mind has been hijacked by the world of phenomena. It's been hijacked by the emotional and social milieu, the addiction to the social media or addiction to media itself. It's oftentimes curating that which would make us fearful and anxious and worried, doubt ourselves. And we all know by this time in human history that if you can be manipulated into fear or provoked into fear, seduced into fear, you're more easily controlled. You lose your creativity, the spontaneous goodness, the transformational knowledge, the innate wisdom that can flow through you. It dissipates. So this particular podcast is dedicated for us taking back our mind. So literally becomes an avenue for more expanded awareness, and that you're more available to wisdom and guidance. So we always begin our program with a life question of the week. This particular life question is from Elise. She's hailing from Redondo Beach, California, and she asks, how does someone lovingly support a beloved family member who is going through a very rough time in their life when they refuse to make the changes necessary for their healing? My loved one is in an extremely toxic relationship, is caught in an endless cycle of depression, and is using substances to cope. This has been going on for years and only seems to be getting worse. I'm concerned for his safety. As a family, we have tried to advise and help him in any way we can, but it's of no use. What is the best way to show this person love and support without enabling or condoning his behavior, or just sit idly by and watching him? Elise, I absolutely appreciate your compassion, your love for this particular family member. And there's a couple of things I would say. One, if he is, I'm saying he, I think you may have used the word he, I'm not sure whether it's, you said your loved one, so he or she. If in fact they are resisting your assistance, then it's going to be very difficult for you to guide them to paths of balance and health and healing and wholeness. So here's a couple of things. One, in your own mind, in your own awareness, you have to begin to feel how much you love them. And from that feeling of love, you hold the space in your awareness for their perfection to unfold. We're all born perfect, and we're here to grow. You hold the space within your own heart where you're meeting them wherever they are, but you're seeing them as they ought to be. You're seeing them as a part of their potential. That's the vision you hold in your awareness. And then when you speak to them, and you speak about them, particularly if you're a praying individual, you're speaking and holding a space where you're seeing the vision of their perfection. So that's one. Secondly, one person can't change another person. It is impossible for us to change anybody. We can't do it. What changes someone? What changes someone is what is called illuminated truth. That if someone, I was speaking with a professor, a teacher recently, And I was saying, you know, one person can't change another person. He said, well, no. I change people's lives every day. When I'm speaking and I'm educating and I'm encouraging and I'm inspiring, I change their life. I said, no, I appreciate what you're saying. But what's changing those students' life is the truth that they're catching. You're a vehicle for the truth. But the truth that makes us free is an illuminated truth. So what does that mean for us? That means you're to turn within, catch the truth of their being, and hold that space so that when you speak to them, you're actually holding this space of truth energy that one day is planting seeds. All you can do is plant seeds, and they may grow when the condition is right. Now, what provides the condition to be right? We've heard this statement, an individual just gets sick and tired of being sick and tired. Fannie Lou Hamer said that years ago, and I think they also use it in Alcoholics Anonymous. When a person gets sick and tired of being sick and tired, they become receptive to truth, or they have a spiritual insight. So as you're holding that space of love for them, you're providing a vibrational condition for them to either get sick and tired of being sick and tired, a crisis, or they'll catch an insight. The other way is through family and friend intervention. And only you know, or the family knows, if it's time for that. And you know what an intervention is. You get an individual that assists you with the intervention from Al-Anon, Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, whatever the case may be, along with your family members. And you basically, at some point, surround this gentleman and say the path that you're going down is deadly. You will die with the substance abuse, the depression, and the toxicity that's around you. And you have to kind of get a feeling, is it time for an intervention? I've been a part of interventions throughout the life of service that I have lived over the last 40 years. And in most of those cases, they were very, very productive. The individual was shocked. And then in some cases, I think I'm seeing a couple in my mind now, they relented and said, you know what, I do have an issue. And they were able to be open for help. So I would say, one, hold them in a space of love and see their perfection. Don't try to change them. One individual can't change another individual. Only truth can. So at appropriate times, you can plant seeds of truth. You know, there's a statement in the scripture that says, don't cast pearls before swine. They will use those pearls and turn and rend you. They'll attack you with your own language, your own teachings. So you don't cast pearls where there's not receptivity. If the person isn't receptive, they'll only resist it even more. So you do the best you can in love. And then thirdly, if you feel that it's becoming deadly, an intervention may be necessary. So Lisa, I hope that's helpful to you or anybody else who's listening. Have a bright day. We're going to be right back with Jeff Krasnos, founder of Commune. He's beautiful. He's articulate. He's very learned. But the thing about Jeff, he actually practices the things that he's learned over the years. We'll be right back with Jeff. Peace and blessings, everyone, and welcome back to Take Back Your Mind. And obviously, this is the podcast where essentially we're inviting you to take back your own mind. That it may have been hijacked by perceptions and points of view and opinions and media and the social milieu and, but you have a mind. And the mind is ultimately to be an avenue of expanded awareness through spiritual practice, through high vibe conversation, and all manner of ways. So this is about taking your mind back, coming out of the hypnotic spell that you are separated from the divine. You're separated from the presence that is never in absence. And today I have with me, as I mentioned earlier, Jeff Krasnos, chairman, founder as well, right? CEO of Commune Media. Now, many of you already know who he is, but for those who don't, it's an online learning platform for personal and societal well-being, which he founded in 2018. It seems a lot longer than that because you've had such a big impact. He hosts the Commune podcast, interviewing a wide variety of luminaries from Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, Matthew McConaughey, Russell Brand, even myself. He also pens a weekly essay exploring spirituality, culture, and politics that is distributed to over 1 million individuals. He is the co-creator of Wanderlust, a global series of wellness events. And in 2016, he was selected by Oprah Winfrey, Big O, to be part of the Super Soul 100 as one of the nation's leading entrepreneurs. 1995, this is very important, probably the most important of everything. He married his college sweetheart. How do you pronounce her first name?
Skylar.
That's what I thought. So I'm just looking at it, and it says, this looks like Skylar.
Yeah.
Skylar Grant. They live in Los Angeles. They have 3 beautiful daughters. As we were talking earlier, suitors are lining up around the block. He's got a cabin and a shotgun to make sure everything goes well with his beautiful daughters. So listen, first of all, let's talk about, your personal unfoldment and your personal development as to, how you became this version of yourself. What insights occurred to young Jeff that allowed you to be here today?
Yeah, well, I had, I suppose, what you might call a spiritual inflection point, kind of midlife. And this is not an irregular thing to happen to people. I mean, Carl Jung talked about this. Yeah. It's actually written in Hinduism that, after you become a brahmacharya student and a householder, then you become a forest dweller. Right. Like you bug off into the forest and find yourself, and then you become perhaps a sannyasin. I'm certainly not there. But, I think I count myself quite lucky to have had the opportunity to have a spiritual U-turn in midlife. Mm-hmm. And, like many people, I really ground my self-worth in my ego, specifically in kind of the role that I played in society and, how other people saw me. Mm-hmm. And, I was, it started Wanderlust, that became a relatively significant concern. And my identity and was really bound up in, being the CEO of Wanderlust. Right. And when I left that role, under some extenuating circumstances, to be candid, I really had to take a spiritual inventory of like, who am I really, mm-hmm. And I had to stop looking externally and look internally. And of course, as we all know, oftentimes life's biggest challenges turn into our greatest teachers. Right. And that certainly was the case for me.
Right. So you have a keen interest also, not only in the spiritual dimension, but in health. Yeah. You have certain practices and certain points of view that are very, very powerful.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I after excavating a lot of spiritual traditions, I found that one of the best ways to actually grok the metaphysical mm-hmm. is to study the physical. Mm-hmm. Because that's where nature's foundational intelligence is patterned. Yes. And as an observer of nature and your body mm-hmm. as nature, mm-hmm. you can begin to see the patterns that are part of what I think of as nature's operating system. And that was really enlightening for me as I started to get into the chemical messengers, hormones in your body and how they interact and push and pull and excitatory neurotransmitters versus inhibitory mm-hmm. neurotransmitters and different enzymes and, all of the workings of the body. Right. They started to reflect sort of a deeper universal wisdom that, to be candid, I found echoed among the ancient mystics of Eastern philosophies, and we can bore into that if you want. But
I do, because I know you. I know, as myself. I mean, you're into meditation. Yeah. I think it's kind of in the Buddhist tradition. Yeah, slightly. I mean, you have your own version of it.
That's right. Yeah, I would say Vipassana certainly was the gateway in, but sometimes I joke like I have a number of wearables, and I know that this is an audio podcast as well as a visual podcast, but I'm wearing an Oura ring here on my hand, and this is obviously links with an app where I can get data on my sleep and heart rate variability and heart rate. I wear a continuous glucose monitor on my triceps here, which is really a dashboard into my blood glucose levels. That was a huge deal for me because I discovered when I put this on that I was pre-diabetic, and we can get into that. But the wearable that I seem to gravitate most is one that's 2,500 years old, and this is the one that I wear here, which is just a Malabi.
Right.
Of course, this isn't 2,500.
But it carries significance, and it carries your energy, and it carries, I guess, a focus of prayer and intention on a regular basis.
That's right. I mean, and I see it as important as my other medical devices.
Yeah, right.
This is another sort of, you could categorize it as a medical device, but it's a spiritual device.
Right.
That I use as part of my meditation practice as a drishti of sorts to focus my attention, to give me a single pointedness of mind where I use the breath, and on every inhale and every exhale, I roll a bead through my thumb and forefinger.
And you do this on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're having an open-eyed meditation.
Yeah.
And living in that frequency.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, this is one of the biggest challenges for me, and I'm likely not alone in this respect, is I'm distracted. You know, I used to be able to sit down and read a book, and I pride myself in research and rigorous study, particularly around the podcast that I do, but I find it more and more difficult to actually sit down and read a book. So I have to train my mind to maintain that single point of focus. And obviously meditation is a very useful tool to leverage for training the mind.
Well, it is often said by me,
That's true.
that at a certain point of our development, we are distracted, but we're aware of the distractions without being distracted by them. So that it becomes just a part of that which is passing through our sky of mind, you know. So we're aware of the distraction, but even though there's a distraction there, we're still able to put our attention on where we want to go, rather than just being pulled into the distraction.
Well, this is actually very funny that you said that, because I just read this paper by Matthew Killingsworth and maybe Dan Gilbert, though I might have messed up those names. But they wrote a paper, and it had a scientific paper, but with a very curious name, not one that you generally see in some of the more highly stringent science papers. It was called A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind.
Okay.
And they did a clinical study where they actually looked at people. They used an app for this, but they looked at people. And what they found was that there was a correlation between dissatisfaction and unhappiness and a distracted and wandering mind. But there was some good news in it, because what they found was the happiest people, it's not that they weren't distracted all the time, but they actually had the capacity to be distracted and then move back into a state of focus. So it's exactly as you said.
Right.
It's like we're perceiving all sorts of phenomena moment to moment, subsiding, emerging, disappearing, etc. Can you be aware of the shell on the desk and your beautiful face on this book, and then move yourself back?
Yes.
And the people that could move themselves back with greatest acuity were the happiest people. So it was interesting.
Yeah, that's beautiful. 'Cause I can notice, like, even if I'm driving in my car and I'm kind of mentally preparing for wherever it is I'm going, I can actually feel the thought of something distracting me, and it pulls me into another reality. And I say, okay, boom, and I just bring myself back. I said, no, I don't want to go there. I want to be here because I'm about to be with Jeff. I'm about to do whatever I'm about to do, but I'm aware of that. And I laugh at myself at how many times there's a distraction, but then after a while, I'm not distracted by it, but I'm aware there's a distraction there, you see.
Yeah.
And I think this is, I guess, the product of what we're practicing in terms of our meditation.
Yeah, I mean, can we be here now?
Yeah.
You can't be happy in the future.
It's impossible.
It's the province of the now. And of course, and we know this, and if my daughters ever listen to this, they'd be rolling their eyes all day. You're like,
Well, that's
Dad,
what our
you're
children are
talking
for."
some bullshit right now because I'm hardly perfect. But we all know this as a product of our own direct experience, is that we tend to, we're sort of carrying around the heavy rucksack of the past.
Yeah.
We're often very anchored in past events, that
Yes,
could be,
absolutely. Yeah.
trauma and anxiety related to that. But what then we often do is we take those events of our past and then project them into the future as, I think it's Daniel Kahneman called it this, as negative anticipated memories.
Right.
I was like, when I read that phrase, I was like, oh,
That's
I'm using that.
I like that.
As negative anticipated memories, that we are creating a future for ourselves that is already negative. Even though it's out there, we have no idea
It's
what
a
is
blank
gonna happen.
slate, but we're projecting our anxiety and our anxiousness about something we experienced in the past onto the blank screen.
Yes.
Right.
And
but you know what? That's how so many people live.
Yeah.
That's
I live that way from time. I'm not, like I said, we're all works in progress,
Absolutely.
right? You're farther down the path than I am.
Yeah.
But, and then if you begin to sort of just build on that idea, there's an initial anxiety that we have, that we create about a past event that we project into the future. Then we're looking towards that event. And we've already...
And that's unconscious too.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
And then we're looking towards that event. Our mind has already put a valence and salience on that event in the future.
Right.
And then it's not that we're just anxious about the event. We become anxious about the anxiety
Yes.
that then we feel.
Right.
And then we're like, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight
Because
of that. And you layer this thing up like a brick house, you're like a mason laying bricks of anxiety on top of each other.
Right.
And you're like waiting for the big bad wolf to blow it down, but he never does.
And what happens though is your body, it starts to produce toxic chemicals.
Right.
And so your body's actually living in that anxiety that you've projected into the future, but it's living it in the present.
That's right.
So your immune system is compromised, your blood pressure is high, your coherence of your brain is gone, and it hasn't even happened.
This is why so much of physiological disease results from phantoms of our own projection.
Right.
So we won't get too geeky there, but we'll play it out just for a moment.
Right.
So we know that when we're in a sympathetic state, when we have amygdala hijack, when we're sympathetic overload, that stimulates the production of certain hormones triggered by our HPA axis, this hypothalamic, pituitary, adrenal axis. It tells like our adrenal glands, for example, to make these steroid hormones, which we know is cortisol and epinephrine.
Right.
Over time, chronic cortisol, high cortisol and high epinephrine levels are going to lead to higher blood glucose levels that can eventually cause diabetes. They can cause greater adiposity in your viscera, which can lead to greater inflammation. Inflammation is behind so many of the chronic diseases that we have.
Absolutely.
It also can completely disrupt the gut flora in your intestines, and we know now how important the microbiome is.
Right.
So this isn't just like some airy-fairy of Michael and Jeff talking about like, oh, anxiety is going to make you ill.
Right.
This is really proven science.
Right.
And we can see it in our culture.
Right.
Listen, it's very important that we are stringent about science. There's a lot of potential inputs, our food system, environmental
That's
toxins,
a whole other conversation.
all these things.
Yeah.
But there's absolutely no doubt that anxiety and stress that are more prevalent than ever have real downstream physiological impacts.
Absolutely. That's probably why one of the reasons I called the podcast "Take Back Your Mind," so that it's not running amok, with all this unconscious input that's leading to the anxiousness, the anxiety, and all the things that you so powerfully described.
Yeah, we look at like the media landscape.
Oh,
Let's
not.
But just as a source of anxiety
Right.
and stress, that is specifically designed around a business model to leverage human negativity bias to essentially trigger all of those mechanisms that we just talked about.
And they know how to get people addicted to it. So they already know they have customers forever tuning in at 11 with music. Or 6 o'clock news. They have certain levels of music behind it. Today at 6, you're going to discover that blah, 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 blah is coming and it might kill you, and they have the music and people are just sitting there taking all of this in, and then everything that you described begins to happen. And as you said, oftentimes the big bad wolf doesn't even come.
Yeah.
The manifestation of their worst fear doesn't even happen, but the body is living the manifestation of that fear.
Listen, I'm guilty of it too. I mean, we live in an attention economy or the persuasion economy.
Yes.
You and I are vying for people's conscious attention as part of what we do.
Yes.
And, the temptation there is so great to just slap like a sensationalist or hyperbolic title on a YouTube video or something like that, because we know that will be rewarded.
Right.
But when we really start to untangle the downstream impacts of doing that, well, we just talked about it. That's what happens. This is the tricky thing, is that like you and I were both dedicated to spreading important information, but how do you get heard?
Right.
And so this is like the tightrope that I think you have to walk right now, is that, you need to have a strong voice, but how do you avoid playing in to the sort of ad revenue-driven media model that essentially is making people sick?
Right. Ultimately, we want people to trust us, that if I have Jeff on or whoever I have on, is going to bring a level of true knowledge and wisdom based on the personal experience and the insights and revelations. And we're not trying to just grab a bunch of likes, but we're actually trying to deliver something that's going to change someone's life for the better.
Yeah.
Now, the Tao of Health, mysticism and medicine.
Right.
I know you're very involved in that as well. I mean, we're talking about it.
We're talking about it. Yeah, I think so. The Tao arose in 450 BC. I mean, the history is a little mangy, right?
Yeah.
It was written by a mystic and sage like yourself, Lao Tzu, that escaped the royal guards. And
fortunately,
yeah,
for us.
Although, thank goodness, the tale that might be apocryphal is as he was leaving, as he was the national archivist for the dynasty, one of the guards stopped him and recognized him as a man of wisdom and said, "Hey, before you go, I can't let you go. You got to write some of this wisdom down." And he was like, sort of grudgingly wrote the Tao Te Ching.
Right.
It was like very short, 81 verses. Here you go.
Here you go. I'm out.
I'm out.
But I wonder if that actually happened. That's powerful if it did.
It's a wonderful.
It's a wonderful story.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. But the Tao, as much of Chinese philosophy does, it revolves around the concept of the symbolized in the yin yang, that you have that nature arises spontaneously and organically, and as part of nature there is phenomenon that is both that is anchored in this concept of the unity of opposites. So the symbol
unity of opposites. I want you to hear that. Okay, go ahead.
So to unpack what that means is like, well, we're in Los Angeles. It's summertime. Have you been out today?
Yes, I have.
How would you characterize the day?
It's hot and getting hotter.
Yeah. How would you know that it's hot?
'Cause it's not cold.
Thank you. Okay. So you wouldn't know that it was hot without experiencing something that was cold. And so while these concepts may seem opposite, they're unified implicitly.
Right.
You can't define one without the other.
Right.
And so Lao Tzu and other scholars, Zhuangzi and things, were great students of nature, and they were able to recognize the fact that everything in nature arose as a coincidence of opposites. Coincidentia oppositorum. So
Coincidence,
exactly. And so the symbol, the yin yang, is actually originally the shady side of the mountain and the sunny side of the mountain. Some people say it was the shady side of the riverbank and the sunny side of the riverbank. And of course, you can't just have a completely shady side of the mountain and a completely sunny side because the sun moves. So you have to have a little shade in the sun and a little sun in the shade, hence the yin yang that we know. Now, as you come to be a student of nature, and you begin to observe and witness this coincidence of opposites everywhere, and then you focus that attention internally and study the body, it's everywhere to be found.
Yes.
So I got very interested in, again, the patterns that are witnessable in the material and how they can give us insight into the immaterial. So this is the Tao as applied to human physiology.
Right.
So then, when I began to look, so I put this, as I mentioned, I put this little disc on my triceps. It's a continuous glucose monitor. It was a couple of years ago, and lo and behold, I found that I was pre-diabetic. I was like, man, I thought it was like a healthy guy. I run a wellness company, for God's sake. But, as I unpacked it, I was like, man, I don't sleep great. I probably stress a little too much. Maybe I have a couple cookies around the edges. But, there's other factors that could contribute to what I discovered was insulin resistance. So I had insulin resistance. And that was showing up in a variety of different ways, through energy levels, like brain fog, chronic fatigue. I had like a nice little muffin top layer, of fat around my viscera here. I actually have like a little skin tag underneath my my armpit, which is an indication of insulin resistance. You can also get those little bumps on your neck. So now actually when I walk down the street, I'm like insulin resistant. No.
You can just see the signs.
I can see the
symptoms.
signs. Yeah, this is everywhere I go. I'm like, oh, can I tell you about? No. So as I started to really unpack this, because I was like, man, I got to pay attention to my own health, I started to learn about insulin. So insulin is a peptide hormone. It's made up of strings of little amino acids. It's produced by the beta cells in your pancreas. And what it does primarily is usher glucose from your bloodstream to cells for the creation of energy in your mitochondria. And over time, due to a whole bunch of different potential inputs, but particularly diet, your cells can become insulin resistant. So every cell has millions of receptors on it, and and one of those receptors is for insulin, and when that's working properly, it says, okay, yeah, sure, we'll let the glucose into the cell so you can make ATP, you can make energy, and come and do Michael's podcast and move your lips and have thoughts and breathe. Other things that energy are important for.
Right. So this thing that you wear, I mean, is it feeding something that you go look at home?
Yeah. So not at home, on my phone.
I have it here on your phone.
Yeah.
Okay, you can just look at it.
So I can open an app and I go beep, and it says, okay, well, here's your glucose levels. So what I found was, okay, the insulin. Well, guess what? Insulin is a yang. I mean, I'm sort of dumbing it down a tiny bit. Right. But it's responsible for growth and anabolism and hypertrophy and hyperplasia. Everything that grows in the body is related to insulin. So it must have a counterpart. It's called glucagon. Insulin, glucagon, yang, yin, part of growth, repair. And so part of being healthy and aligning yourself with nature is fostering that sensitive balance between yang and yin in your body, in this case, between insulin and glucagon.
Right.
So you can grow when you need to grow, but you can also repair when you need to repair. And when your body is in a low glycemic state, when you don't eat sugar, for example, or you're fasting, your pancreas is not going to trigger insulin. It's going to trigger the release of glucagon that breaks down fat, triglycerides, into ketones or free fatty acids, et cetera. And you can get into a state of ketosis where you're burning ketones for energy instead of glucose, and you can reverse your insulin resistance. And so for me...
So intermittent fasting is a good thing.
Big deal for me.
Yeah.
Now, everyone's everyone's a individual. Different protocols are going to work differently for different people. But for me, the combination of intermittent fasting a low glycemic plant focused diet and cold showers,
I do all that.
Yeah. I reversed my insulin resistance. I got more energy.
Yeah.
I lost my brain fog, and I lost 50 pounds.
I was looking at you when you walked in here today,
Yeah.
and you look really good.
Thanks.
But I don't remember the 50 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, I distributed it well, let's say.
I mean, but I can see that you're very slim.
I'm slim, and
You know.
I lost a lot of weight, and then I started, for the first time in my life, working on resistance training.
Yeah.
Because I actually realized how important
It is.
the development of musculature is actually for glucose
Yeah,
regulation
I do
and
it,
a bunch of other
I
things.
do it 5 times a week.
Yeah,
I'm in the gym with a trainer 5 days a week.
yeah.
I mean, I still do yoga as well. But I think as you are on the planet for a longer period of time, I call it anti-gravity work.
Yeah.
Because gravity's pulling on you 24/7. It's not giving you a break unless you go into outer space.
It's like 3 daughters in gravity pulling you.
Right. So you have to have some kind of anti-gravity work. So I do the yoga, but I also do resistance training on a regular basis as well. So
Yeah, I mean, for exercise, what I find is that balance again between sort of flexibility training
Yeah.
that you can get with yoga,
Right.
Strength training. You also get strength training with yoga, but with focused resistance training,
Right.
and then some form of cardio.
Yeah.
Now, I kind of mix high intensity cardio. I'm a avid tennis player, still a very competitive tennis player, so I go out and go full force. But you know,
you're not even playing to win. You're just playing
I'm
just
playing
to
to
hit
play.
the ball back,
Yeah.
just to play.
I'm playing like a musician plays music.
Yeah.
Musician doesn't play music to finish a song.
Right.
He
Just
plays
playing.
to play.
I was at the Shaolin Temple a number of years ago and working with some of the monks there, and there was a guy traveling with us who was a professional ball player. He played in Europe, and so the monks were playing basketball. So he jumped in. He's the tallest one. You know, all the Chinese were pretty short, and they're playing basketball. They're playing intense. These are guys who are up at 4 a.m. meditation. Then they do their kung fu practice. It was a really insightful time for me to be there. And then they're playing hard, defense, offense. They're going at it. And then all of a sudden they all stopped. It was lunchtime. And he's standing there like, who won? What's the score? And they said, oh, we don't do that. We just play. They had no attachment to who won the game. They had no attachment to how many people scored and what they scored. They just played the play.
Yeah.
Then they went to lunch, and he was standing there looking perplexed.
Well, this is the thing. Of course, we coronate winning and
Yeah.
scorekeeping in our culture. But I mean, this speaks honestly to the purpose, or what one might call the purposelessness of meditation.
Yeah.
Because these guys were meditators, so they knew that you meditate. The real meditators, I would say.
Yeah.
They just meditate to meditate.
You're right.
They're not chasing some sort of product per se.
That's right.
So, yes, we could sit here and bullet point out like all of the potential benefits from meditation.
Absolutely.
You could grow cortical thickness. You could improve focus and optimal performance at work, and you could increase insulin sensitivity, even all this kind of stuff. But the second that you start to bullet point all of those reasons to do it, you kind of lose the plot.
Totally. But that's how we are in the Western world.
Yeah.
You know, one of my next book is on meditation, and that's I've been teaching meditation for a long time, but I never did a book on meditation. That's one of the points that I bring up, is that here are all the benefits. These are the byproducts of meditation.
Yeah.
But meditation itself is basically you're not attaching yourself to some future event. I teach that you're already enlightened. You're just removing the blockages to who you are.
Right.
And you're just sitting. So it's exactly pretty much what you're saying. It's
Yeah.
not like one day.
Well, the second you become focused on the terminus of your journey,
Right.
the journey becomes completely dismal.
Totally.
And that's why people hate meditating.
Right.
Or it
Because
seems,
nothing happened.
it seems like a chore.
Yeah.
Like Alan Watts has a great way of framing it. He always says, oh, meditation, just kind of stop with all your hang-ups about it. It's just grooving with the present.
Yeah.
Just groove with the
Just
present.
groove the presence, man.
Just have fun.
Yeah.
You know? So it's, yeah. Anyways, I actually funny because I just felt this in my pocket, sort of odd thing to bring to a podcast.
Oh, do you want to light some incense?
Yeah, no. So I was cleaning my daughter's room. Oh, no. It was in there this morning, actually. And I was like, there can't be any profitable use of a lighter in your bedroom right now. And I grabbed it. And I was like, I'm going to bring this. I'll just put it in my pocket. And on my way here, I felt it. And I was like, wait, I brought this lighter to this podcast I'm doing with Michael. And I was like, I was interested, like, how does a lighter actually work? And I'll get to, there's a reason why I'm going there
Sure,
now.
I know.
Because I was like thinking about it on the way here. I was like, why do I have this lighter? So I said, Siri, what is the chemical formula of butane? This butane is what initially makes the flame. And then I believe it's C4H10. So 4 atoms of carbon and 10 of hydrogen, and that forms butane. Okay. So then what happens when you actually light it? There we go. So there's a chemical reaction happening here with oxygen. It wouldn't actually light without oxygen in the room. And then it's giving off carbon dioxide and water vapor. So, in the hottest parts down here, down by the blue. And, and I started to think about it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's a lot of like what humans do. We use oxygen and we give off carbon dioxide and water.
Right.
That's exactly what happens when we make energy in our cells. And I was like, that's interesting. I never really...
So you have a living symbol of what the human body does.
Pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah.
And we're making energy. That's what we're here doing.
Yeah.
And eventually we won't.
Right.
Just like this will stop making energy
Eventually
too.
the body will be evicted from the temple.
We'll give it a proper burial.
Right.
And this is germane to the conversation, really. And one of the things that I learned about what I call the Tao of Health is that, we know that everything about what makes this flame up is moving on moment to moment. But we recognize it by its form. It's like you recognize that I lit it a couple minutes ago. It looks about the same, but it's really just the form that's the same. All of the atoms and molecules associated with it have moved on.
Even the flame itself.
It's moved on.
Right.
And this is
it's transmuted.
Exactly. And this is also very much like you and me. We are not fixed beings. Right. We are constantly in a state of change and impermanence. Of course, the Buddha, without the luxury of a stethoscope or a electron microscope or whatever, intuited this 2,500 years ago. But modern science is proving it. And we are in this constant sort of vibratory exchange of atoms and molecules that's happening all of the time inside the human body. And this really can reframe how we think about disease and well-being, to be honest.
And longevity.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because once you understand that you are a form, that you are a process, that you are not a thing or a product, then you have more agency over this process.
Right.
You can't really have a disease like diabetes, like I had pre-diabetes. You don't really have a disease. Like I couldn't say like, hey, Mike, I brought in my disease. I'm going to give it to you today. It's not a thing. It's a process.
It's a process. And it doesn't happen overnight.
No, it's progressive in every sense.
Right.
This is why young people should care about their health.
Right.
And you have an opportunity to be an agent in that process. You can be moving towards wholeness. That's the process of healing. You can be moving towards disease or illness. That's the process of ailing. And you have a tremendous amount of agency. So this notion that we are really just a flame, we're very similar. We're just a form, that everything that's in us is moving on at all times. Like, we talked about the microbiome briefly. We're about 70 trillion cells over here.
Right.
About 70 trillion cells over here. I might have a few more cells than you. And 39, 40 trillion of those are prokaryotes, they're bacteria, mostly in our gut. But everywhere now, they're finding them in every organ, in our eyes, in our mouths, on our skin. I just gave you some.
Yeah.
It's actually, it brings up other existential questions of like, what do you call a self?
Right,
I just
right.
gave you part of myself.
Right.
Was it ever mine? I don't know. But those 39 trillion cells, they come and go every day. I mean, they last between 4 minutes and about 24 hours.
Right.
So most of what makes you up is just
Physically.
coming and going.
Right.
Physically, yeah.
And we're not linear beings either.
No.
That's a whole nother conversation.
It's a whole nother thing. And your white blood cells, your neutrophils, the epithelium in your gut, all of these cells are turning over. I think we talked about it a little bit before we started. Your heart cells stick around for a long time.
Yeah, at least 40
years. The cells in your eyes stick around for a long time. But we're very impermanent beings, and that can be scary, but it can also be powerful.
Well, you use the word agency. This is our time. This is, as you said, the Buddha, that was the age of agency, what he was teaching.
Yeah.
But now with all this science and everything you're describing, this is the age of agency.
That's right.
We actually can participate in the process that you're discovering. We don't have to be victimized.
That's right.
By toxic environment, the media, as we talked about earlier. We could actually be a part of this process and move towards homeostasis around health, wellness, well-being, however we describe it. We can be a part of that instead of giving over our agency to something outside of ourselves, which is what people do when they just don't participate in their own healing, going to a doctor. And there's nothing wrong with going to a doctor. I'm just saying that oftentimes they just give over their whole power to that system and don't do enough inner research to discover what's happening, as you've described. What's happening here? How can I participate in this?
Yeah, you have to become a student of nature and yourself as part of nature.
Right.
And, Mark Hyman says it, but other people have said it too. You become the CEO of your own healthcare.
Absolutely.
Because, like you said, for generations upon generations, we basically went once a year, even if we kept the appointment, which many of us wouldn't.
Right.
And to see generally a man in a white coat.
Right.
Who
giving you a snapshot.
Yeah. Of a single moment in time of where your health is. And generally you wouldn't get, I didn't get a call back, I'm fine.
Right.
But, I like to use the metaphor, you wouldn't drive your car without a functioning dashboard.
Right.
And now medical science has given us, individuals, functioning dashboards to be able to have insight and transparency into your own health. If your check engine light went on in a car, what would you do if the oil pressure light went on in your car? You'd probably blow it off for a day or two, but then you'd deal with it.
Yeah. And I probably shouldn't say this.
There's the lights on in your dashboard.
No, not for me. I was just thinking about, I won't say who it is, but somebody's close to me. We call him the car killer because he will not look. He'll let that red light go for so long. And he's very close to me, and he has cars in his driveway because he just will not take care of business, and he's become like like a joke.
Yeah.
We're not mad at him; they're his cars,
Right.
But it's like he won't do it.
Where the metaphor ends is he can buy a new car. We only have one vehicle,
one body
at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, that may change.
Cloning.
Cloning.
Well, let's not go down that
CRISPR.
path.
There's all these other things.
Right.
Yamanaka factors, whatever. But I mean, this is just I think it's a challenging but fascinating time to be alive, Michael.
Yeah.
And you have to be discerning with the information. But I say you have to sift through the grift.
Right.
But there is a tremendous amount of agency that we have. That's the age of agency is really the way I put it.
Yeah. No, I love that phrase. The good stress. Or adversity mimetics.
Yeah.
I know you have a lot of information about that, and you talk about cold showers, heat. I mean, there's a whole dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll frame it this way. Health is balance in every system. In economics, when you have a thriving middle class, that's healthy.
Yeah.
In politics, when people can cooperate and compromise, that's healthy.
Right.
And in nature or biodiversity is a representation of health.
Yes.
Of course, now we kind of keep drifting into areas of great imbalance.
Right.
When you get
And all those areas that you mentioned.
Yeah, when you have three guys that own more collective wealth than the bottom 50% combined,
Right.
that's not healthy.
Right.
When you only grow corn, wheat, sorghum, and soy
Right.
at the expense of, sprouts and radishes and heirloom crops and stuff like that, something's wrong. Something's imbalanced. When you have extinction of habitat and extinction of species, you're out of balance.
Yeah.
Balance in the human body, you said the word before, is called homeostasis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a process. It's not a product. We move around it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not stable. It's very, very sensitive. And it is susceptible to input. So when we look at the great imbalances that are happening in human health right now with chronic diseases, particularly heart disease, diabetes,
America,
cancer,
the sickest nation in the world.
Alzheimer's. What we see is that those are representations of imbalances.
Mm-hmm.
So then what do you do to address imbalances? Well, you need to adopt the protocols of balance to pull things back towards the center, because healthy systems they cluster towards the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really what good stress or adversity mimetics do.
Mm-hmm.
So we often associate stress with chronic stress.
Mm-hmm.
That's bad.
Right.
We talked about that earlier.
Right.
But self-imposed, short-term, acute, deliberate stressors
Yes.
that confer a health benefit have been shown to be really excellent.
Right.
And the reason why they are is because we evolved with them.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about heat, like
Heat.
saunas, cold, like cold showers or cold dips or
Absolutely.
whatever.
Fasting,
Mm-hmm.
light therapy,
Mm-hmm.
even social fitness.
Mm-hmm.
We have to stress ourselves to connect again,
Mm-hmm.
because we become so isolated.
Right, right.
But particularly, for sure, deliberate cold therapy, fasting, of course. On the Serengeti, we enjoyed periods of abundance, but significant periods of scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
And our body developed adaptive mechanisms to deal with that scarcity. But what have we done in the modern world? We've eliminated scarcity.
There's our country, 60% of the people are suffering from obesity?
Yeah.
It's something,
It's like 45% obesity, 80% overweight.
Yeah.
I mean, and then, we kind of normalize it.
It's normalize it, and
Yeah.
we want people to fall in love with themselves wherever they are.
That's right.
But we're not still dealing with the fact that the heart is saying, and you lost 50 pounds.
Yeah,
I know you feel a lot better.
I do.
I know your heart's a lot healthier,
It is.
And you still loved yourself when you had the 50 pounds.
It's not about shame.
It's not about shame
at all. In fact,
Yeah.
to be honest, I have incredible compassion for those people who are suffering
Right.
from obesity-related diseases.
Right.
Because not only I was there, but I also understand the systems that perpetuate realities like food deserts,
Yes.
or
Yeah,
or the I mean, I hate to use the word conspiracy, but I'll use the word collusion that happens between like big food and government and agriculture.
Right.
Where essentially through subsidies
That we're paying for.
that we're paying
our
for.
taxpayers.
Yeah, we're paying for it on all sides
Right,
of the
right,
equation,
right.
to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
That then allow for the production of unhealthy foodstuffs below the true cost of production, because
Right.
we're subsidizing it,
Right.
that allows fast food purveyors to turn around and offer a $1.99 Big Mac.
Absolutely.
And then
That we pay for already.
we-
Even if we don't eat it, we've already paid for it.
yeah, well, we're also paying for it on the other side with the healthcare costs.
Right, right.
And so when you get into like, universal healthcare, how are you going to pay for it? We're paying $4 trillion now, 90% for sick care system,
Right.
97% of which is to treat preventable chronic
I was just
diseases.
getting ready to bring that up. Everything you just mentioned is preventable.
Yeah.
And in the age of agency, we know now that even hereditary patterns can be transcended with proper diet, exercise, mindset, etc.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are some genetic factors
Well, there's
that
some exceptions to that
predispose
rule.
you,
Yeah.
that what
Yeah.
they say, like they load the gun.
Right.
But
You don't have to fire it.
No, you don't have to fire it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, for example, I just interviewed this guy, Dale Bredesen, kind of the world's most foremost expert on Alzheimer's. And, we talk about there's this particular presentation of genes called the ApoE4 allele. And if you have two presentations of this gene, you have a much, much greater chance that you're going to contract Alzheimer's.
Right.
I can't remember what the number, but more than 50% chance. But that still means that 45% of the people are not getting it. Why are they not getting it? Okay, so
what is the condition
Yeah.
that they have that's not allowing that gene to come into expression?
What are the protocols or
Yeah.
the choices, the lifestyle that they're adopting that inhibit the contraction of that particular disease? So, like you say, the onset of these diseases are progressive. They're generally preventable. And in many cases now, we're finding they're reversible.
They're reversible. Yeah, that's what we're finding a lot too. Yeah, I
So-
find that in the community, people will call me about stuff all the time, and I give them what I know. I say, hey, I'm not a doctor, but if I was you, I would stop doing this, and I would do this, and then they come back a few months later and say, the condition is gone.
Yeah.
But I always add a dose of prayer in there as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a multi-flank attack. Not attack, but, we have to think about it from
Right.
a lot of different angles. I mean, for me, I realized, if my blood sugar level was high, I had to address that in my diet.
Yeah.
And I found that with intermittent fasting, and I will just, my one little hack that I'll give, because I generally sometimes get a little philosophical and don't get down to the real techniques, is that what I found to work really for me is that before I break fast, so I'm on a 16-8 protocol, so I condense all of the consumption of food into an 8-hour window, more or less, between 11 and 7. I'm not neurotic about it.
Yeah, I understand.
But
You're flexible.
Flexible. Before I break fast, 10:30 a.m., at that juncture, I'm in a very, very low glycemic state because I haven't eaten since 7 o'clock the night before, or 6 o'clock, depending. That's when I'll take my cold shower. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because when you take a cold shower or a cold plunge and you get into ice, what happens? Your core body temperature plummets, okay? And your body, you have a thermostat right above here, right above, and as part of your hypothalamus, says, we got to warm you up. You have an internal thermostat that gives your body that message, and it sends you into energy production. Okay, so you need to engage in a process called thermogenesis to upregulate your body temperature up into that little Goldilocks zone right around 98.6. But it's got to burn something to do that.
Right.
It's got to make energy, and energy needs fuel. But I'm in a fasted state, so there ain't no glucose around because I haven't eaten in 15 hours. So what's my body going to use? Fat. It's going to convert triglycerides in my adipose tissue into free fatty acids and ketones, particularly this brown fat that exists back here. As you get older, it comes
Sean
here
Stevenson
and
talks
here.
about that a lot. Yeah.
And it's brown because it's dense in mitochondria, and mitochondria have iron in them, and iron makes it brown. But those are highly metabolic fat cells, really positive, healthy fat cells, and they're going to kick in, and you're going to burn fat to make energy.
So then after you take this shower, is that when you do your smoothie?
Yeah. So then I'll eat afterwards.
Yeah. But you know what you described? I do the same thing, but I didn't have it it's more a part of my my routine in the morning.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I decided,
Yeah.
I heard you speak and decided to do that. I wake up and I do a little tiny bit of exercise, not my major exercise, a little bit just to get things moving. And then I have my warm water with little minerals and some lemon in it,
Yep.
And then I will work out a little bit, but I take my shower and it's cold. Then I do all of my smoothie stuff.
Yeah.
And then go into, so I'm kind of following
You
your
were
pattern.
doing it intuitively.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, you know, as part of just one's routine.
Right.
But, for me, I became interested in the geekiness of it.
But you're a geek. And I always love talking to you because you have all the science and this research behind what I intuit. You know, I do research as well,
No,
but I
no.
realize as I'm listening to you, I do a lot of these same things, you know, but it came more of an intuitive hit, and then how my lifestyle evolved, and I'm feeling good about my
well,
body.
we're a good yin yang
Yeah.
ourselves, because to be honest, all this stuff is great to understand,
Yeah.
but it don't mean a thing if you don't feel good.
If you don't feel good and if you don't actually practice it.
Yeah.
So 2 things before we get out of here.
Yeah.
Regenerative agriculture. We talked about it a little bit. Why don't you talk about that? And then I want to actually let people know about your, you still doing retreats?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you still got your podcast going? And then you have several powerful courses. And then you have a way for people to get into these courses at no cost in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then I want people to know about that as
Yeah.
well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we could park regenerative agriculture into a future podcast.
I think
It's
so.
such
I think I'm
such
have to
a
have you
big
back
deal.
because there's so much stuff we're talking
Such a
about.
big deal. And there's so much opportunity in it,
Yeah.
honestly, as we, barrel into, the climate crisis kind of full force. There's so much opportunity there
Yeah.
in regenerative agriculture. And of course, we've not only decimated our soil, but decimated the nutrient content of our food along the way. So
Absolutely. Just on that note,
Yeah.
I remember reading that back in the day, we used to be able to say an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but now you'd have to have 25 apples
that's right.
to
Well,
mimic
it's
one
also,
apple.
now we never eat it in its whole form.
Right,
Don't peel an apple.
right.
You lose all the quercetin and the pectin and a lot of the fiber.
Right.
Eat whole foods, and
Right.
and like you say, a lot of that, the ascorbic acid, the other things, content of it has been degraded because
Right.
where does, of course, it all makes sense, but like, where does your fruit and vegetables get its nutrient content? From the soil.
Right.
So
If the soil is depleted, the fruit is
not
depleted. Right.
and there's very specific, chelators in the soil, like glyphosate, et cetera, that essentially prohibit the nutrition to pass through. They sort of hold the minerals in the soil, so you're not even getting those. And then, of course, there's this disruption of the shikimate pathway, which is this whole amino acid thing. So we'll get into that some other time.
Yeah.
But, in terms of, the podcast is cranking, I mean, it's like,
Say the name of it.
it's a Commune podcast. It's on all your podcatchers, so check it out. I interview Michael and amazing thought leaders and luminaries, a lot of doctors too.
Yeah.
I enjoy it, and it's also an albatross. I mean, I take it very seriously. So, I think I've read 300 or 400 books in the last couple of years. So it's like,
He's doing a lot of research for us. Check out his podcast.
Yeah.
And you still doing retreats up at your place?
yeah, we're doing
Yeah,
retreats
that's a
up in
sweet place.
Commune,
I love coming
Topanga.
up there. Yeah.
And I've started leading some with my wife, Skylar,
Okay.
which is a dangerous gambit. Do anything like that. Skylar and I have worked together for many, many years, but generally in our own lanes. So now we're, chocolate and peanut butter, maybe. Sometimes I'll oil and water on other days. Mostly chocolate and peanut butter. So we're leading some retreats up there together. I lecture a lot about metabolism and things like that, and I do story time at night, and I read, and she does yoga. She's my muse, so
Yeah,
I'm just her
she's a cool-
torchbearer.
She's a cool being.
And the courses are cranking, man. We've got 130 courses on the platform now. The whole goal is to democratize access to well-being, get more people involved.
You have free 5-day pass.
Yeah,
They can just try it for 5 days at no cost. I know I have, what do I have here? I have Meditations for Life Challenges.
yeah,
It's also one of the programs.
that's right.
Yeah.
We're going to relaunch that again too,
Yeah.
and that's been a hugely successful program.
Yeah.
And it was right on time because people really.
It was right in the middle of the lockdown, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Or
people
somewhere close to it.
Yeah, people really. It was so useful for people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, there you go.
Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks for being here. Any last words? And anything that... Well, we're going to have you back.
Yeah, I would just say, adopt the protocols of balance. Really become a student of nature. Understand yourself as part of nature, and understand that nature, when unimpeded, naturally moves towards balance.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, we just need to get with the flow. Use the current of the river.
Yes.
And refine our capability to move the rudder just so that we're actually moving with nature's operating system, with its profound intelligence, and that'll move us towards balance.
Biomimicry.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I had a mystic on recently, Brother Ishmael Tete from Accra, Ghana, and that's basically where he pulled all his information from, just
Yeah.
watching nature. He's what you call a nature mystic.
Yeah.
And you both are saying the exact same thing, but from a different. He curated the knowledge differently, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for
Appreciate
being
you,
you,
man.
Michael. I love being with you.
And I love sharing my cells with you.
Nice.
Peace and
That's
blessings, everyone. This is Jeff Krasno's Commune. Check it out. We'll be right back. As you know, all of our podcasts carry the frequency of meditation. Meditation is extremely important. Meditation allows us to, one, prepare ourselves and be available to an encounter with the presence that's never an absence, as I call it. Sometimes it's called a confrontation, an encounter or a confrontation. Sometimes it's an encounter, and sometimes the magnitude of the truth of our being confronts the ego, confronts those part of ourselves that are temporary, that are not really us, something that we put on, a mask that we put on. That's a personality, the constellation of shifting personalities get confronted by the light of our own being. So whether it's an encounter or a confrontation, meditation is providing the condition for that kind of insight to occur. It's very important for healthy living, very important for life itself. So we know about the byproducts of meditation, but an encounter or a confrontation is really why we are sitting, to open ourselves up. So I invite you to turn within. That means to bring your attention away from the external world. Close the outer eyes. Tap the space between the eyebrows so that we're giving ourselves permission to see with the inner eye. Hands on the lap facing upward as a sign of receptivity. And sit in this moment of stillness. Sit in this moment of sacred silence. And sit in this moment of creating your vibrational fortress of solitude. We embrace our intention to be available in this moment to an encounter with the presence, life itself, love itself, beauty, intelligence. Some may call it God, but we can call it love, beauty, intelligence. That's everywhere. And we want to not just know about it, we want to know it. And this is why we sit, be still, and to know. If the mind drifts into distractions or fantasies or inner conversations, without resisting any of that, be aware of it, but then come back here to your intention and perhaps allow your breath, the awareness of your breath, to keep you in present moment. Let's add one other thing to this meditation process. Dedicate the next moment to someone in your life or someone you know about that needs to be uplifted. You're dedicating this moment to someone else's liberation and freedom. Someone who may not be able to sit for themselves right now. Continuing in your stillness, your silence, and your solitude, where we just added the factor of dedication to someone else that may need some vibrational assistance. Now allow yourself to catch the feeling tone of gratitude and thanksgiving that you exist. Existence itself, you exist. You're alive. Just be grateful. Slowly open your eyes. And this consciousness of gratitude, we just give thanks for everything. And live in the altitude, in the attitude of gratitude. Go forth into your day with that. Peace and blessings. You've heard me say the old statement from time to time that an individual that's unwell, individual that is sick, has only one dream. But an individual that's healthy has many dreams. I want you to be a healthy individual from the inside out. One of our sponsors is Neutralize, Neutralize.com, that carries Adaptogen. Adaptogen is my superfood greens with 47 different plant-based ingredients, adaptogens, plus probiotics, prebiotics, and digestive enzymes. One scoop is going to do you really well. Go to our sponsor, Neutralize.com, look under adaptogens and get the bundle. Subscribe to the vitamin D3, K2, and the superfood greens. Your body's going to love you. You also have heard me say over the years that spiritual community grants you immunity from the lower frequencies of life. The other sponsor is Agape International Spiritual Center. We're in our 37th year. Go to agapelive.com. Notice that we have 3 services on Sunday. We have a university with classes. We have many different programs and ministries, all for the unfoldment of our soul to be the best version of ourselves. Those are our sponsors for now. Have a bright day. Your time is very valuable, so I want to thank you for lending us your ear and participating in taking back your mind. If you want to submit a question for the question of the week, please submit it to podcast@michaelbeckwith.com. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please submit a review and let us know your thoughts. Stay on top of current episodes by subscribing to the podcast so that you'll receive alerts and not miss one single episode. And feel free to share this podcast with all of your friends and family. And until we meet again, take back your mind, and you will take back your life. Peace and blessings.